today in China, having lived in China for 1 year, people ask me, what is my biggest takeaway living in China? Is I can tell you there's not a single easy life in China. It's pretty hard life, and that means whatever you do to make the consumer's journey more convenient, you are more likely to attract them to come to your place. A bit more on aviation. I think if you look at sort of the market share position of direct flights from China to Australia, China doesn't take 43% of the pie. It's significant capacity, significant. And if you add China Eastern and Air China, that's more than 75%. So as much as we love to work with second-tier airlines, we're absolutely committed to the airlines that are putting their dollars, their profitability, thanks LC, on the line to help to grow our tourism economy. All right. Now, one more thing you might find interesting. So why do I spend so much time talking about Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and also a bit of Chengdu? Is that when you look at how big China is, you probably will be a bit intimidated by where do I even start to target and to go after my business. But the reality is that the bulk of the visitors from China are from these little chunks. So 17% from Shanghai, 15% from Beijing, which I believe can be a lot bigger if we get more direct services. Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and the rest of the Pearl River Delta is 15%. And then the 13% sitting with Yangtze River Delta is your Hangzhou and Nanjing and so forth. That's pretty much the whole area of East China. And then Sichuan, which includes Chengdu and Chongqing, is a growing area of 5%, and the Shandong province, 5%. The other 25 provinces make up 31% of visitation. So there is how you prioritize your dollars and your effort. And then you look at sort of behavior of the people from the key sort of areas, Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. You will see that they also have different preference of where they go in Australia. For example, the orange bar is those who have been to Melbourne. So people in Shanghai, they prefer some place that's more cosmopolitan, a bit more representative of Shanghai, and because they think that it's all about culture, about food and wine. It's about a sort of what we call 小资 lifestyle, which is a bit of a capitalist, lifestyle. And Shanghai people prefer Melbourne a lot more than Beijing. Why? Because for Beijing, you see the Beijing people, they live in pollution and landlocked. They like to go to Brisbane, Gold Coast more than other places. And then for Guangzhou, you see a lot more of them going to other part of Australia beyond the Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Gold Coast, and Cairns. Is because they've got more services into Perth and Adelaide. So there is sort of that subtle difference between the cities in China. And what we're doing as the next step is that we're actually looking at breaking down our consumer data, not for the China as a whole market, but different part of China to give you more insight. Because I do think it does help you to precisely target consumers with the behaviors better if you have the data of the regional breakdown. I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to quickly go through some of the consumer demand project data I'm finding. Now these are very small print. I'm sorry, but we make this presentation available to you afterwards. Important factors. It's pretty much for the Chinese being safe and secure, being natural environment and all that is really important. What's interesting is that their preference of where they want to go versus the global consumer sort of desire for Australian destinations. So what you're seeing is that you're seeing the black bar is China, and then the gray bar is what we call 11 market aggregate. That's the global benchmark. So the Chinese consumers, their intention, of course for Sydney, Gold Coast, Melbourne is all high, but Kangaroo Island stands way up there. Why? They might not know where Kangaroo Island is, but when they think about Kangaroo Island, they know it's Australia. So kangaroo being in Australia sort of symbol like a panda. People say, oh, if there is a place called Kangaroo Island, I must visit because that's where I can see the wildlife that is most representative of Australia. So KI sits very high. Canberra sits very high because it's capital. The Chinese consumers think Canberra is as important as Beijing. You know, every Chinese person, when they grew up, they want to all go to Beijing as the first destination domestically. Why? Because it's the capital. Same thing of that sort of consumer behavior is reflected in Canberra. Of course, Cairns, Great Barrier Reef. So there's some interesting observations from the Chinese consumers' perception and the desire of where to go in Australia. Barrier to coming to Australia. I talked about flight. The flight is too long, not direct service, but very often when you have to connect, the flight can get really long. Not enough time. People think Australia is such a big place, you need 2-3 weeks, and I think our job is to ensure that they understand Australia is not just one trip, but multiple trips. Very often we say, well, Australia is what they call a once-in-a-lifetime place. Well, then it's a once-in-a-lifetime. We defeat the purpose of attracting return visitors. So we're changing this to really around Australia has such a variety and diversity. You just have to come back more often and then take smaller chunks once at a time. I just want to talk about planning and booking because I think what we're seeing is that with so much ticket in the market, the planning window for the Chinese consumers coming to Australia is shrinking. One, visa is easier and faster, and many of them have multiple entry visas. So when visas are out of the way, they don't have to worry about planning 2 months in advance. The second thing is that with so much airfare, the consumers are very confident that they can grab something that's last minute. So what you will see is that as the Chinese market move into from a group or from a package tour market to a FIT market, your pipeline, your business pipeline will see a much shorter lead time from Chinese consumers, and especially for FITs, they probably will only book your product when they're in Australia. So that is a challenge that every single operator in Australian tourism industry face, and it's getting to the comfort level of having the faith that the Chinese consumers will be there, so you've got to have the inventory ready for them, at the same time that you will have to be able to capture higher yield from them. It's about pricing the inventory with the time factor in there to fully capture the spend power of the Chinese consumers. As I've talked about this as well. And the last thing is to talk about our Tourism Australia in China. What we do, of course, we try to bring the Chinese expenditure to $13 billion. My boss and my boss will give me a much bigger number, but let's get to $13 billion first, and then we can get to a bigger number by 2020. Okay, I'll be around if you have any questions, and thank you.